Dr. Licata. It's nice to have you here talking with us a little bit about vital brain skills and yourself. Could you just introduce yourself? Tell a little bit about your practice, how long you've been doing this, and about your background. Maybe what got you started.
Yeah. Dr. Giancarlo Licata. I have a diplomate in quantitative EEG, and I've been working with children and adults with brain challenges, concussions, autism, even chronic migraines for over 15 years. And I guess I've always been interested in complicated cases, and people are complicated, and sometimes they don't fit easily into like one simple little hole. And yeah, so being able to actually visualize the brain using EEG has been something that I discovered about 6 years ago. I partnered with a few other companies. They were doing it here in our office, and I was blown away. I was blown away. I thought it was incredible that we could actually see where somebody was injured, even if it didn't show up on an MRI. I found it amazing that we could actually see different regions of the brain, and depending on what was going on there, we could kind of predict how that person's feeling and what's easy for them to do in life and what's hard for them to do in life. So yeah, it was what got me into this was a deep desire to help people and to find new tools to help the really challenging situations where there's just no easy fix.
So, can you tell us a little bit about some common misconceptions about autism that you've encountered, and what parents should be aware that they can do to avoid, perpetuating some of these myths?
Yeah, I mean, so I think a common misconception is that my child is broken, right? My child has a disease. I think that's not helpful and it's not accurate, right? I think it has you know we have different rooms and hallways in the brain, and some of us are born with or develop certain rooms that overconnect or connect a lot, and we have certain superpowers. And then there may be other rooms that don't connect as well, which may make it harder for us to sometimes relate to others or communicate. But the idea of there being like this kind of universal disease that our child has or suffers from, I think is not accurate, and it's also not really helpful for them. So yeah, I think a big misconception is that, my gosh, my child's broken. Um, now, another thing that I think is really important is that while these things, are unique to our child, um, I think that there's some things that can be improved, they can be strengthened, they can be optimized. And so while not going to fully broken, um, I think that we're always trying to equip our kids to thrive in a really challenging world. And I think the other extreme is to just say, well, they're just neurodivergent and that's the way they are. And sometimes that can kind of be an opposite extreme and an opposite misconception. So we want to accept them fully as they are, and know that they're fully valuable as human beings. And if it's possible to help them thrive a little bit more, achieve more of their potential, help them feel more whole or more regulated or more able to kind of express themselves in this world, I think we should be able to also encourage them to do that. And I think there's some amazing tools that do it. So there's kind of like two extremes, right? We want to be somewhere in the middle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I imagine this concept of the halls and doorways, as you put it, for the brain, and also just looking at things from not from one extreme to the other would also apply to other conditions beyond autism.
Yes, absolutely. We have so many, clients that come to us, and they're given the diagnosis of ADHD, or they're given many learning disabilities or neurodivergent, labels of, dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia. They have, there are all these things, oppositional defiant disorder.
Mhm.
There's all these things that, at the end of the day, does boil down to certain rooms and hallways in the brain. And and again, we usually, the first thing we ask our parents or the client is, okay, you have this thing, is it getting in the way? Right? And if it's getting in the way, then okay, do we want to see if there's something we can do to maybe optimize it a little bit more? And if it's not getting in the way, then great, let's leave that alone, right? So, but yes, but I think a lot of, especially, with, children and adults on the spectrum, they're going to be given lots of other diagnoses. And whether that's anxiety or ADHD or certain learning disabilities or oppositional defiance disorder, or they're going to be given a whole laundry list of things. And I think what's important for people to understand is that those things are not separate. They can be reduced down to kind of really specific areas. And again, is it in the way? No, let's leave it alone. Is it getting in the way? Okay, well, can we do something to help? But yeah, lots of different people come in with a lot of different diagnoses for sure. Yeah.
So tell me, are there any particular cutting edge tools or technologies that you recommend or work with that can aid in a positive outcome for individuals with autism? And if there are, can you tell us a little bit about how they work?
Sure, sure. Funny you should ask. Yes, absolutely. Um, I think the best tool that exists right now, currently, is a functional EEG, or a functional brain map. I think that every parent should have a functional brain map of their child to really understand what these different rooms and hallways are doing, how well they're connecting, um, how much they're firing or under firing. And these EEGs, these 3D quantitative EEGs, allow us to visually see your child's brain, real time. We can literally see the different rooms that are specific to certain functions, and we can see if they're overfiring or underfiring. And so it's an amazing tool, and it's not designed to give you a diagnosis. It's actually designed to give you a better understanding of the function of these areas. And so it's pretty powerful. It's pretty powerful.
Wonderful. Do you have maybe an example that we could see?
I do. I do. So I'm going to pull up one example here and see if we can visualize it here. But this is a 3D EEG. This is a quantitative EEG. We call this a brain map. And this is just one view of a lot of things that we get to see with the individual. And so in this case, this person has some slowing in certain rooms of the brain. And those rooms happen to be around a lot of the social areas on this right side. That's going to be social perception, social processing, doing things that are socially appropriate. It's going to be a little bit harder for this individual to be able to do that well. And we say it's not like a light switch. It's going to be more like a dimmer light, where it's going to be a little bit harder to read faces and facial expressions. It's going to be a little bit more challenging to understand what we call theory of mind, which is, when we ask, little Johnny, Johnny, how do you think Susie feels when you just, took the ball and left, right? Well, sometimes it's not that easy for Johnny to think about how that would make Susie feel if certain regions on the right are not as actively firing and connected, right? And so these are things that will give us insight as to what's going on. And then of course, there's, it also gives the parents some better understanding of maybe they don't need to kind of like think that Johnny's trying to be disobedient, or he's trying to be bad, right? Or he just doesn't care. Sometimes it's it's more of a can't versus a won't in that instance. And so it helps the parent really kind of understand and maybe better, I guess, better respond to the child, right? So so it allows us to see that, and it's really helpful. And we can see so many other things. We can see the connections in the rooms. We can see how fast a child processes information, and we can see if certain rooms are over connecting, or some rooms are under connecting, and that also gives us insight as to. I say this. I say it doesn't tell us who your child is. But it tells us pretty definitively what they're working with right now. Right? And I think that's really helpful, especially when you're trying to parent your child and trying to kind of like, guide them in the best way you can. So this is an example. This is a 3D brain map that we do.
Wonderful. And I imagine as a parent or a client, someone who's on their journey towards, optimizing their brain, their condition, that this brain map would actually help to articulate their
Mhm.
condition or what's going on, even beyond, working with you, but even in other areas of their journey. Is that the case?
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And so um, there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of translation between what we're looking at functionally and what a lot of the other, maybe therapists and support, teachers and tutors and so on are looking at. And so, yes, I mean, it helps a parent, better communicate to the school about how, again, maybe their child has a harder time reading body language and faces. And so they may have, it may be harder for them to, respond to the facial expressions of the teacher or to understand when another child is, really upset. They may not get it as quickly, right? So that's really helpful. Another thing that's I think really helpful is when a parent can also communicate to again teachers, usually sometimes it's other therapists, when regions in the front are not as strong or as active as they could be, or sometimes not as connected as they could be, and it means that that child is going to have a much harder time with impulse control. And so again, are they really being defiant? Are they really trying to be bad? Or even though, they said they weren't gonna, hit their brother again, they just did. And then we say, why did you do that? And they can't respond. Mom, my prefrontal cortex is doesn't have enough theta waves in it. And so it has a hard time with my impulse control, right? Like they can't say that, but we could, see that and then we can communicate that. And so, yeah, it helps the parent communicate with the other therapists and the other teachers as well. And again, and I'll make this point. And these things that we mention that we talk about, it's not my opinion, right? These are things that have been published and replicated in neuroscience journals. And so, the prefrontal cortex and impulse control, or the left side of the prefrontal cortex, and really big outbursts that could look really angry and last 40 minutes. Why is that child having a massive outburst at the grocery store for 40 minutes? Well, we could probably see things on the left side, and we could have give you a better explanation as to why. So
And
yeah, it's
provide
helpful.
confirmation, I assume, too, when you do maybe have a diagnosis of ADHD or autism and say, it's, memory issues or impulse, and say, well, yes, exactly. We have this diagnosis, we have this verbal confirmation. Now we also have this brain map that's giving you visual confirmation of what's going on.
Correct, correct, for sure, which is really helpful. Yeah.
Is this a tool that you only would use one time, or is it something that you could use over time to maybe chart progress
Yeah.
for the individual?
Oh yeah, exactly. It's one of the best tools to chart progress, right? Um, so yes, we can do it before an intervention and then after. We sometimes we have parents that come in and they'll do a brain map and then they'll do an intervention somewhere else with a therapist, with some other type of thing that they found, and then you can remap and you can literally measure the change and you can quantify it, right? And so that's extremely helpful. And yes, and I mean, in fact, when we have families that come in and they're doing work to improve a child's executive function. Well, executive function is measured by a lot of things, but it's also going to be firing in the left side of the frontal and prefrontal cortex. And so we can literally see that that area is more connected over time. We can see if it's also able to fire faster. We can see if there was epileptiform activity, if it's reducing in that area. And so those are all things that we can kind of see the before and afters, which again is usually not very common. So it's really neat. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so
Hmm.
much.
Hmm.
So, what do you think are some important things that parents or family members can do to support their loved ones with autism, and how can it make a significant difference?
So, I mean, supporting a child with, with autism or on the spectrum, I think first is just understanding that they're going to respond differently to the things that you would respond to, and that you really want to understand that that child is unique, and you really want to understand how that child, you know, how they respond socially, how much they're able to internalize of what other children are doing and not doing. Um, and so really just understanding that each child really is an individual. Um, there are no two brains that are alike. There are no two people that are alike. And there are no two people on the spectrum that are alike. And so, understanding that, somebody, one child may be nonverbal, but may understand everything. They may process everything really well. They may have more insight and social insight than we parents have. Um, and so, but just because they may not be speaking, doesn't mean that there's not so much else going on, right? And so I think it's important to kind of again understand the nuances of your child, and not project maybe the way that you would do things or the way that a brother or sister does things. So it does require parents to slow down. It does require just kind of looking at our child with new eyes, and that's not easy.
Very true.
Yeah, yeah.
My daughter is just received a diagnosis, so
Mm.
it's allowed me to not only look at her and to, try to understand her a little bit better, try to walk in her 3-year-old shoes, but it
Yes.
also helps me to look at myself a little bit more introspectively in my own behaviors and if they're helpful. If they're necessary, in the situation, and even to consider people that are maybe not necessarily neurodivergent, but are simply just, we're all different. So the way that one person communicates is not going to be the same another person communicates. So it definitely helps me to be a lot more empathetic and to be a lot more, to broaden my view of just people in general. So
Yes, yes.
that's a
No.
beautiful thing.
It is. It is. It hopefully helps us become a little bit more open human beings. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, it is. And, another common thing that is not with everybody, but in different degrees, is also just, the way that they're taking in the world. Um, sometimes there's just the filter, the sensory filter sometimes is not as strong in certain children compared to others. And so we may not realize like walking into a mall is just, we're just walking into the mall. But if our son or daughter has, it's harder for them to filter out sound or to filter out, all the visual input. Um, we may, they may have, it may be so overwhelming that it may dysregulate them so much that it becomes maybe this kind of, dramatic, meltdown in the middle of the mall. And so that's where, as a parent, to understand some of that and understand that they may be taking in the world differently than we are. Um, it helps us think twice about whether not to go to the mall, or maybe at what time to go to the mall, or maybe to, sometimes even just give them sunglasses and maybe some, noise canceling earphones,
Right.
but things to kind of just, understand that they're not taking in the world the same way we are, and everybody's unique, but just to understand that it's not the same. It's not the same. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
So, can you share maybe an inspiring story of someone or someone's who overcame significant autism challenges working with you, and what strategies contributed to their success?
Yeah, yeah. So again, when people come to see us, it's functional, and what that means is we're not here to give them a diagnosis or do treatment. It's not clinical. It's really meant to give them a deeper functional understanding of how their brain is firing, and then use certain tools. And we have a very integrative set of tools where Sometimes it's some executive function training. Sometimes it's some educational therapy, but we'll also do some forms of biofeedback as well to help those regions of the brain either connect better or fire in different frequencies than they're used to. And so, yes, and so I think, let me share one example of a case where, let me pull that up here. Um, And so, this is just an example that we also share sometimes in the office of this is basically a child with, outbursts, just big dysregulation, right? Just big anger moments. And it's like, and parents will often say this. I mean, this is Charles, but like, you know, like he responds at a 10 out of 10 when the issue is like a 2 out of 10, right? Um, and so that was Charles. Charles was a 10 out of 10 kind of guy, right? He would get angry easily, especially if things didn't really go his way. And that's a thing. And that's actually more common on the spectrum. Um, when things don't go the way that the brain kind of is calculating it to go, it's kind of painful
Mm.
for a child on the spectrum or for people that have that area. And it's actually a room in the brain. It's called the anterior cingulate, and that was Charles. And so, um, so they brought him in, and it was they were just wanted some more peace. They didn't want him to be different. They still loved Charles, but they just wanted some more peace. And they realized that even for him, it was hard. He didn't want to have these blowups all the time. And so when we did his brain map the first time around, this is literally the 3D image of what was happening with him. And he had that, what we were describing earlier, right? He had this slow wave activity over regions in the prefrontal areas. And those areas are like they're the nanny areas, right? Those are the areas that keep the more emotional areas in check. And
Mhm.
so when those nanny areas, when those regulating areas are not as strong, that's where Dan Siegel and others have coined the term, right? They flip their lid. The child kind of has these big outbursts. Well, we saw literally that this child would flip their lid a lot because this area wasn't activating as much as it should, right? So now, um, and so yeah, so impulse control, emotional regulation. And so the parents said, well, what can we do about it, right? And we said, well, I think we can do, again, an integrative approach. We can do quite a few things, but we can also do some biofeedback of that area and literally help him gain a little bit more kind of control and insight over that area, right? And so after about 4 months of
Oh,
training, of work, we now saw a difference. Now, in general, what do the colors mean? Gray is happy, right? Um, Yellows, oranges, and reds are too much of this, what we call slow wave activity, and the reds are like really extremely high. And so
is the red to orange to yellow a severity scale?
it's a severity scale, right?
Mhm.
Yes, thank you for clarifying. And so the dark reds are like the most severe, right? Um, the clear gray or white is what we would like it to be. And he went from very, very, very severe throughout the prefrontals and frontals and some of the temporal lobes to, gosh, I mean, mild and a lot of, normal, quote unquote normal, which just means that he has access to that. He has access to produce faster brain waves in that region. And that's not a bad thing, right? Um, and was there still some mild that left over? Yeah, of course, right? It wasn't magic. But now this is in general a much stronger area. And so, well, what happened? Well, we saw at least a 55% improvement in his ability to produce the different brain waves. Um, and and so there was an objective change that was noted there. um,
Absolutely.
but the subjective change is what really at the end of the day kind of matters. And so this is a quote from his mom directly, and she was just saying, look, he's now able to better control his emotions, right? Like, yeah, because that in neuroscience we call that agency,
Mm.
right? And I think optimally, every human, right, kind of we strive for more agency, right? More agency over how we feel, what we're going to say or think. and how we're going to, act in the world, right? And so he didn't have as much agency beforehand, and now he has more, right? He's able to control his emotions, and he was able to cope, right? So how many times are things not going to go a child's way in a day? Uh, right? And so now he has more flexibility, he has more adaptability, he has more resilience, right? And I think that that was wonderful, and that's meant to be lasting. And so the more that he's able to do this, and the more he's able to check himself, and the more that he's able to just, reinforce the positive behavior, he reinforces the changes in the brain, so he's not dependent on us to keep coming back over and over again, right? And so that helps with his executive function training, that helps with his social skills, right? Because if he's always, blowing up in anger, well, that's going to be hard to make friends, right? That's going to be hard to kind of develop these other social skills.
Sure.
And so now that he has more control over that, now social skills development and social skills training just becomes so much easier, right? Like they really thrive with that. So this is an amazing support for that.
And
Yeah.
you mentioned biofeedback. Is there a difference between biofeedback and neurofeedback?
Yeah. And so biofeedback is the umbrella term of all things that give you, the individual, information about what your body is doing,
Mm, okay.
right? And so that could be things like our breath and our heart rate and our how relaxed or tense our muscles are, right? So all of that is biofeedback. There's a subgroup that we call neurofeedback, where we're giving the brain direct feedback as to what brain waves it's producing and what areas are connecting or not connecting, right? And then the same way, the person, the brain is able to then learn to shift it, right? And so it's not a treatment, it's not a therapy, it's a tool, it's a functional tool, right? And so just like, a child hopefully would be learning certain types of mindfulness or certain type of breathing,
Mhm.
certain types of self-awareness, well, this also gives them the ability to have that kind of same, you know agencies, a little bit more control over that, but it's just giving them better tools to do that with.
And this would be embedded in within the Vital Brain Skills program. That's what you
This
mentioned.
would, yes. And so it would, each, with Vital Brain Skills, what's really great is that we get to come alongside and support a child as they're going through executive function support or social skills support. And so, we do an integrative program for, cater to each person. So it's very customized. And but most of the time, we're also going to include in that group of things this type of biofeedback and or neurofeedback, right? And so if a child would benefit from getting a little bit more, control over those prefrontal lobes, then yeah, let's do that. Let's support them. Let's help them do that. And what's nice about it is it's passive. A child gets to literally watch a TV screen, and with little kind of, it's almost like stethoscopes, like little sensors over the region of the brain, and literally when their brain is producing those kind of nice, faster, stronger brain waves, their favorite YouTube video or Netflix show is in color and the sound is in full sound. And when they go back to producing some of those kind of slow waves, literally their YouTube video gets into black and white and it looks like there's rain on the screen and the sound goes down, right? And that child is getting feedback as
Mm,
to what their brain is doing. And what's nice about it is that um, they're wired to just want to see something clearly. Our brain is wired to complete a picture. And so they don't have to try, to like, force themselves to produce a certain brainwave. They just will naturally do it almost like a reflex, because the brain wants to see that YouTube show or YouTube video clear. And so, but then over time, right, neurons that fire together wire together. And so as time goes on, their brain gets better and better at being able to do these things on its own. So it grows and it strengthens the same way, like if their muscles got strengthened.
And
Yeah.
so in addition to this integrative approach within vital brain skills, using these sort of functional tools, all the individuals that pass through vital brain skills, do they also have access to the brain map that you were describing earlier?
Yes, yes, so they do. And so we provide the brain map for every client, and we do one at the beginning to get an assessment of, what's the baseline? How are they doing? And then we'll usually do it every few months after that. And that gives us insight as to how much is improving in the areas that we're working on, what else has been improved based on their other services that they're using. And then also allows us to then be able to determine, okay, what's next, right? What else do you want to work on? And then we can kind of use that to then measure the next change. And so it allows us to kind of be this recurring assessment that we can use over, multiple rounds for a lot of people. And so sometimes, a child comes in and the parent would like that child to have, less outbursts. Okay, great. Well, let's see if we can support them with that. And then afterwards, then it's like, okay, well, it'd be nice if they were a little bit more socially aware, right? Is it possible? Could we actually do that? Well, let's see, right? Like, yes, I think we can. And we can support, different rooms of the brain. And then we can see again the before and afters with those as well, right? So it allows us to kind of keep helping that person optimize as they go along. So yeah.
So, what messages of hope or encouragement would you like to leave us with, parents or maybe potential clients who would be interested in working with you, who may feel overwhelmed by, their own autism diagnosis or with their child's autism diagnosis?
Yeah. I would say, first of all, I think, every child who's on the spectrum has a superpower, at least one, right? They're here on this earth for a purpose, and they have a unique ability to see the world and to interact with it. That is, it's a bit of a superpower, and so I think that for parents to kind of really begin to start to look for those things and to recognize that there's something extremely powerful and special about that child. And I don't just say that flippantly, right? Like I think it really is something that we continue to be amazed by. The skills and the talents, and again, even just the perspective that they bring to the world that completes the world more for the rest of us, right? So I think just acknowledging that I think is really important. And again, I'll repeat it because I think it was worth saying, not in some kind of flippant PC way. Like it really genuinely is a unique gift that a child has, right? And so I think starting to look for that and find ways to express it and develop it is huge. The second thing that I would say is that as a parent, wants to help prepare that child for life and support them to thrive in this challenging world. That there are real tools that are out there that can help you see which areas could be strengthened. There are tools that can strengthen them to further improve that child's agency, self-regulation, self-expression, and ability to, just again, show up more fully in the world. And I think that, and so I think that's real hope. That's real hope. And so they weren't broken to begin with, but as we want to optimize and support them, there are very real tools that can do
Well, thank you
that. Yeah.
so much, Dr. Licata, for your time. Are there any final words you want to leave us with?
No, I'm excited to be able to help, and we get to help people that are, in our backyard here in Los Angeles, and we get to help, people that are all the way in, Northern California and out of state and throughout the country. And so, yeah, I just that's why we're here. That's why we exist. So we look forward to being able to help more families.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It was great talking with you.
Yeah. Thank you.
To learn more about vital brain skills or to connect with Dr. Giancarlo Licata, please visit vitalbrainskills.com or reach out to support@vitalbrainskills.com. Thank you.